events there yesterday, but the morning event I didn't want to miss. On the International Women's Day, the Chandigarh High Court Bar Association and various other platforms had jointly organized a walkathon, and I wanted to participate in it. Because of that, I got late. It gives me immense pleasure to participate in this inaugural session of a very thoughtfully conceived and executed program. And before I proceed with my address, I must congratulate and commend. They really deserve a lot of commendation, the organizers, Indian Women in Law, for this enterprising initiative. Happiest congratulations to all of them. As I look across this auditorium, I am reminded of the understated but formidable courage that defines so many women in the legal profession. There is a distinct kind of strength required to enter spaces where one's presence was not historically assumed, to claim one's place and to steadily reshape the conversation. It is worth recalling for all of us that barely a century ago, under the regressive colonial regime, women in this country were not even permitted to practice law. The distance travelled since then has been substantive, but it has not been accidental. That progress has been earned through decades of perseverance, through service rendered often without spectacle, through barriers confronted with fanfare, and through competence demonstrated repeatedly in the face of doubt. On this 8th day of March, a day globally observed to honor the achievements of women, it is important to acknowledge that the journey toward full and equal participation in our institutions remains unfinished. And unfinished journey require studied reflection. To that end, late Justice Fatima Bibi, the Supreme Court's first woman judge, once eloquently remarked with her characteristic simplicity. She said, and I quote, "I have opened the door." Those words marked a historical moment in 1989. More than 3 decades later, the responsibility before all of us is to ensure that the door she opened does not depend on individual exceptionalism. It must remain open not by circumstance, but by structure, sustained by institutional will rather than personal breakthroughs. The theme of this conference, "Half the Nation, Half the Bench," is such a profoundly timely and resonant topic for today's discourse, one that is perfectly aligned with both the urgency and the opportunity of our time. A sobering reminder that when half of India's population looks to the institution entrusted with safeguarding constitutional rights and finds only limited reflection of its own experience, the concern transcends statistics. Rather, it goes to the heart of institutional adequacy. Pertinently, it concerns the confidence of approximately 650 million Indian mothers, sisters, and daughters who must believe that the justice system understands their realities and will respond to them with fairness. We all know that women who ascend to the bench did not bring a separate standard of justice. The Constitution remains the same. The oath remains the same. The office remains the same. What changes are the lived experiences that inform judicial perspective. Women often bring distinct insights shaped by how law operates in homes, workplaces, and everyday realities. Consequently, their presence does not merely add diversity to the bench, it deepens the court's engagement with the society it serves. By broadening perspective, our jurisprudence itself is enriched. But to speak only of what women contribute without acknowledging what it has taken for them to reach here would be to tell only half the story. The legal profession, over time, has unwittingly developed a working climate that imposes invisible costs disproportionately on women, from late night briefings and inadequate facilities to unreported workplace bias and repeated questions of authority. These are all daily realities that I'm quite sure all of you are also familiar with. And yet, despite these burdens, countless brilliant women have excelled in this profession because they believe in its ethos. To my mind, this is precisely why representation matters. Every woman who takes her place on the bench sends a clear message to those still facing these obstacles. Your perseverance is not unseen and it is not in vain. When a young female lawyer sees another woman presiding a court, not as an anomaly or outlier, but as a matter of course, something in her psyche shifts. Aspirations becomes tangible and belonging becomes unambiguous. Let me be very clear. Any discussion we shall have today is not an argument for preference. It is an argument for a fair starting line, equal opportunity, equal responsibility, and equal space to demonstrate competence. Today, we must deliberate on strengthening the architecture of opportunity, which breeds a legal landscape where deserving candidates rise not as tokens, but as natural choices. Once we accept that access is the real question, the next inquiry is unavoidable. How far have we progressed in securing it? That's the question. Well, I can say with some satisfaction that meaningful steps have been taken even before discussions on reform gathered wider momentum. Supreme Court had already moved substantially toward greater inclusion. And rather I should say the judiciary as a whole, not the Supreme Court alone. In that spirit, the court exercised its extraordinary power to address the glaring underrepresentation of women you have recently seen in the elected bodies within the legal profession. We directed that in state bar councils, at least 30% of the seats must be occupied by women advocates. We also issued similar directions to the Bar Association on pan-India basis. I would implore all of you to not view this as merely a symbolic exercise. It is, in fact, a pragmatic step aimed at correcting the structural imbalance that prevents women from having a real voice in the institutions that shape the future of the bar. Elevation, after all, is not a simple or instantaneous process. It requires nurturing the pipelines at its very source. And if the pipeline is narrow at its source, the bench cannot later be brought. However, the responsibility does not rest with the court alone. That we need to understand. The system as a whole must be sensitized. Bar associations in particular have a constructive and indispensable role to play. Members of the bar, particularly our male colleagues, must acknowledge and accept a simple reality. And what is that? Women members are not seeking concessions. They are seeking fair and appropriate representation which has long been due. Only when the profession itself internalizes this truth will the pathway to the bench become clearer. Another area of reform lies within the High Court collegiums. They too must recognize that the moment for measured action is not in the future, it is now. Where suitable, meritorious women members of the bar are available, their consideration should not be an exception, it should be a norm. And where I will go into the extent that where in certain high courts or district courts, suitable candidates within a particular age bracket are not immediately available, that should not become a barrier. I earnestly request the High Court collegiums to widen the zone of their consideration and include women advocates practicing in Supreme Court who belong to that state. I point out these solutions not because they are extraordinary, but because they are entirely within the existing framework. We must acknowledge that institutional intent is no longer enough. It must always be accompanied by institutional imagination. Having said that, there are encouraging signs. Multiple women are currently serving as Chief Justices of High Courts. With the elevation of my sister Justice iWiL, now there will be 3 Chief Justices in the High Courts. Certain High Courts also deserve particular commendation, like my own parent High Court Punjab and Haryana, for instance, has demonstrated notable progress with as many as 18 sitting women judges. The Madras and Bombay High Courts have also about a dozen female judges each. Equally significant is the encouraging scenario in our district judiciary, which offers perhaps the clearest indication of what lies ahead. With women comprising approximately 37% of the working strength of judicial officers in the district level, the foundation is steadily strengthening. Friends, this is not a simple statistic. I would argue it reflects a generational shift. If we speak of a pipeline, which I illustrated just now, it is here that it is visible widening. And when the base of the system reflects greater inclusion, it is only a matter of time before that strength finds expression in the higher judiciary also. I may also add that the development of judicial and legal infrastructure can meaningfully advance the cause of equality. The expansion of virtual hearings, improved digital access, structured monitoring, or supportive facilities, all can strengthen inclusion without diluting standards. Even the creation and proper allocation of professional workplaces or chambers within court complexes for women advocates will make tangible differences to their professional lives. These developments indicate that the momentum has begun, the environment has been created, and with steadily increasing numbers of women entering and excelling in the legal profession, it is both natural and necessary that their presence on the bench grows suitably. Yet we must guard against complacency. While momentum is encouraging, it is not completion. We must all understand a reform of this nature is not an event, it is a continuing process. The cultivation of institutional fairness requires persistence beyond individual tenures and beyond individual personalities. It may not reach full fruition within my term of office, nor within that of maybe my sister and brother judges. That, however, cannot and should not determine the depth of our commitment. If progress is to be meaningful, it must be institutionalized. The story should not be that one individual secured greater representation. Rather, it should be that the Supreme Court of India and the high courts across the country consciously embedded fairness into their processes. When that happens, Representation will no longer depend on personalities or moments of resolve. It will stand anchored in the structure of the institution itself. And that ultimately is how enduring change is made. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Mathura, giving me this opportunity to share my views. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.